Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the introductory class to International Trade Masterclass. It has been wonderful. The last episode, we talked about foreign exchange, sources of foreign exchange to a country, and we highlighted a number of sources to a country. I'm sure by now you are already getting to become a trade expert because you can speak to foreign exchange, you can speak to what trade is, you can speak to how values are exchanged. So I'm excited to be here again. Today we are going to be talking about another thing entirely, visible trade. Before we proceed, do not forget to like, to share, and the notification bell so that you get notified of the next episode. Visible trade. What's visible trade? Visible trade are tangible products that can be sold. They are products that you can sell, you can touch. For example, you can sell plants and machinery. These are hardware, something you can touch, something you can see. Also, raw materials. You can also do that you can also describe that as visible product. Also, vehicle, textile. There are many laptops. Everything that you can touch, that you can see, is actually a visible product. And there are many. Now, we talk a lot about trade. What is trade? Why trade? Now, let's talk about methods of payments. We have 4 basic methods of payments. We have open accounts. We have bills for collection. We have cash in advance. We have letters of credit. These are different methods by which trades can be settled. Now, let's talk about open account. What is open account? Open account is a form of payment method. It's a payment method acceptable in the world, except where country is specific about non-acceptability. For example, in Nigeria, open account is not acceptable as a mode of payment, but that does not mean it's not acceptable in other parts of the world. Now, open account, sellers dispatches goods to the buyer without any guarantee of payment. That means if you have accepted open account as your method of payment, the seller will ship the goods to the buyer and the buyer will pay thereafter. Now, the seller is exposed to payment risk because he can ship his goods and the buyer will never pay again. So when it comes to risk, it's more on the seller because the seller will have shipped the goods waiting for the buyer to pay. And also, the documents are sent because, of course, you cannot take delivery of the goods without the shipping document. The documents are sent to the buyer's bank, and the buyer's bank will release the documents to the buyer. So, 2 things the seller have let go. The seller has released his goods without payment. The seller has also given access to the good by sending his shipping document. And the buyer will access the goods by the shipping document and will sell and later sell the money. But obviously, there's an exposure on the side of the seller. Now, why will anybody agree to ship his goods, send the document without payment? It normally happens between sister companies. If the headquarters is somewhere else and other branches and in outside the location of headquarters, they can send such. But most of the time, it is not a payment that unknown party will likely adopt. Now, how will the buyer settle? The buyer can use any method of payment to settle such obligation. Maybe by bank transfer, he can do that. The exporter has, in this type of process, the minimum bound involved is actually 1 because you are sending the document from the seller bank to the buyer directly. So it may just be a single bank that is involved. And another advantage to the exporter is the more the bank is always the more the expensive. But because it's a single bank, charges are also reduced. But of course, do not forget, charges may be reduced, but the payment rate is also there. Payment method is accepted because it's very simple. It's not complicated. I send my document to the buyer's bank and the buyer's bank releases the document to the buyer. So it's very simple and people will always accept it. It's only the risk associated with payment, but of course, to the buyer is the best option. That's on open account. Now, let's look at another mode of payment, cash in advance. Cash in advance is like opposite of open account. This time around is the buyer that is sending money before receiving the goods. That means the buyer is exposed to performance risk because he can sell the money and the seller may never ship the goods. So the buyer is exposed to performance risk. Now, the importer bear all the risk, like I said, the performance risk, and exporter will use this method when they are not sure of the importer's creditworthiness. They will use this method if the importer is unknown to them. Unlike in open account, it's between the head office and the branch. But for cash in advance, the exporter might have never seen the importer before. And for him to be sure that his fund will be paid, he will opt for cash in advance. But of course, the buyer is at the risk, is facing a risk here. Then this payment method will also be used when the political environment of the importer is not stable. If there is political instability, the exporter will stand the risk of not getting his money. So the best option is to get the money before sending the goods. So you see exporters say, okay, there's instability in this country, let's go for cash in advance. This method is also acceptable when there's possibility of delay. If the exporter is envisaging that the importer will not pay timely, he will also opt for cash in advance. So basically, if you are not sure of who this importer is, if the political environment is not stable and is an unknown importer, honestly, I advise you go for cash in advance. There are other ways that the importer can mitigate his risk, even though he's exposed to performance risk, maybe by way of insuring the goods. So win-win, the importer can insure the goods to pass the risk, while the exporter will be covered because he's getting his money in advance. Thank you very much. I'm sure you have learned one or two things in this episode. We are talking about methods of payment. There are 4 of them, and we have explained 2: open account and cash in advance. I'm sure if you want to buy anything, if you want to participate in international trade, you are no longer a novice. You can actually decide on the method of payment you want to accept. Thank you very much. Do not forget once again to like, share, and the notification bell so that you get notified. Thank you.